the only show focused on stars improvement strategies and the leaders who implement them. This is the Rising Stars with Rex Wallace Show, brought to you by Hyperlift.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stars. We today we're gonna do something a little bit different, but the topic today is really driven through by the final rule that came out recently. So which left a lot to be desired from the information that we got out of it, but the most compelling change now, at least, is really all around the reward factor and something called HEI, which we're going to dig into today. So if you think about 5-star plans, which is really so achieving 5 stars is really the objective of the game of stars, right? So we want to achieve 5 stars. And in the last 2 years, we've had more than we've ever had before. We had 74 2 years ago. We had 57 this year. Before that, we'd never had more than 21. Part of that was driven by COVID-19 disaster relief, we know, the better of, which drove 5-star plans significantly up 2 years ago. This year, a little bit different story. We had a lot, and there were other explanations for that. But in all of these plans, if you think about campaigns, right, we talk about strive for 5. But because of this one change that we're going to dig into today, we honestly see it more as a potential dive from 5. And we think it's going to massively change the distribution of stars in the coming years. We're going to dig into that today. So the thing that's different about today is typically we have external guests, so health plans, vendors, outside entities. Today, because of what we're talking about, we decided, hey, let's keep this internal. So we actually have all our team, or people from our team today. So first off, I'll bring Mick in. Mick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
And our 2 guests today are Nate Lucena, Senior Consultant with RWC. And I'll let you guys give a quick intro in just a second. And Josh Renken, Head of Customer Success at Hyperlift. So welcome, guys. Excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Rex.
Let's actually would you take 30 seconds and let everyone know about you, your background, what you do now, your focus. Nate, you want to start?
Sure. So I joined Rex Wallace Consulting as a senior consultant a few months ago. Before that, I spent about 5.5 years at Centene Corporation, where I actually cut my teeth on Medicare Stars analytics as a business analyst. I went on to lead enterprise quality analytics for the organization, then eventually moved into some strategy and operations roles before leaving and becoming a consultant.
And Josh.
Thanks. Josh Renken. I've worked with Mick at Hyperlift for 6 years. How long ago did we start Hyperlift? Something like
About
that?
6 years, yeah.
About 6 years. As you mentioned, I lead customer success and do a lot of work with our great clients and focus a lot on product development as well, making sure we've got the best star solution in the industry. So there you go.
Great to have you guys. So let's start the discussion off with Nate. So Nate, in the final rule, we saw the finalization that in 2027 stars, the reward factors going away as we know it now and being replaced by the Health Equity Index. Can you give a high level description of what is HEI? What does this mean for plans?
Yeah, so it is CMS's attempt to kind of refocus how they incentivize plans to perform away from what we now know as the reward factor, which obviously incentivizes very consistent high performance across star measures, to consistent and high performance in members with social risk factors. Important to note, it's maybe not all the social risk factors that we would have initially thought of, right? Race, ethnicity, primary language. CMS for now is sticking to social risk factors that are actually, tied to benefits because it's easier to track the data that way, right? We know we have a complete data set for members who are dual eligible, have the Part D low income subsidy, and have a disability flag. So CMS will take those groups, they will lump them all together across a 2-year period, and look at the performance rates across that 2-year period in that group. They'll create a bunch of distributions and they'll divide them up into thirds. And it will depend on where a plan falls within that distribution, on whether they get an HEI reward of 1, 0, or -1. It'll get summed up across all the measures, and then you'll have kind of this comprehensive index of relative to peers where each contract is performing in their members with those social risk factors. So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot more. I could go on and on, but it's all printed in the rules, so I won't do that.
So even swap for these high performing plans, right? They lose the reward factor, but they get the HEI. So even swap.
No. We're all laughing. Oh yeah. Who wants to take that one?
Feel free, Nate. I'll jump in on some of the reward factor specific stuff.
Yeah, so we've taken a look at this. It's definitely not an even swap. So CMS did quite a bit of simulations. It was on data from 2021 star rating, so a little bit outdated even now, maybe for the member makeup of the industry. But while they found that around the same percent of H contracts will get some type of an HEI Health Equity Index reward, so it's about, I think, 34% of contracts got a reward factor. About 33% of contracts would have gotten a positive HEI. The magnitude of that reward on average is nowhere near as large. I think it's about half as big. So Mick, you did some calculations, and the average reward factor was
28%, or I'm sorry, 28 basis points.
28 basis points. And then by CMS's simulations, the average Health Equity Index reward was only about 10 or 11. So similar number of contracts, but on average, a much smaller reward.
So, yeah, I mean, like, I think I understand that the Health Equity Index is going to replace reward factor, right? But I think it's dangerous to think, okay, I'm going to replace my reward factor with the Health Equity Index. The chances that a lot of these traditionally high performing plans are going to be the ones that are maxing out the Health Equity Index, I think is very low. And when you think about the overall impact of losing reward factor, I think it's far more significant, than, maybe we're really internalizing. The impact of this, we looked at this, let's take the 5-star for an example. As Rex said at the beginning, 57 plans got 5 stars in STARS 2023. And so we went ahead and ran all of the numbers for every contract in the industry. And what we found was all 57 of those contracts received a full 40 basis points of reward factor. And when you take that reward factor away, 98%, or essentially all but one contract would have dropped to 4.5 stars from 5. So this is the dive from 5 that Rex was referring to. In that one contract that stayed, only made it by like 4 basis points. So the reality, when you start bringing this into play, it's going to fundamentally change the math that these plans have kind of worked on for years and years and years. And so it is going to create a need, almost like Tukey did a year or two ago, where we need to have conversations with leadership, because if our performance remains exactly the same relative to the industry and everything, we're going to take a big drop, very likely. And, essentially through no fault of our own, it's a rule change, but we're going to see performance drops, star rating drops across the board. And so, it's time to start that communication process and then figure out what are those counterbalance strategies, what budgets can you unlock to start getting ahead of this.
When you think about who is impacted the most, I mean, we just kind of talked through the 5-star plans clearly are on that list, right? I mean, to get a reward factor now, you've pretty much got to be 4, 4.5, or 5 stars, right? Because the mean has to be
Yep.
high, at least right now. 5-star plans, and we always kind of say a 5-star plan is a 4.5-star plan with a 0.4 reward factor, right? Like in Mick, you just validated that with your analysis that 56 of the 57 5-star plans are exactly that. They're a 4.5-star plan. They got they got the max reward factor that helped them become 5 stars. Nothing against them. That's what 5 stars is typically, right? That's what it takes to be 5 stars.
Yep.
You're rewarded for being high performing, but to be 5, you need that boost. Typically, only one plan didn't. So reward factor goes away, and it sounds like they're trading their 40 basis points, their 0.4 R factor, for probably 0.1 at the most. It sounds, or at least on average, I guess, across the board, right?
Well,
is that fair to say?
I think the hard part about truly modeling that out is based on the data in CMS's simulations. We actually don't know, right? We talk about the Venn diagram of who is losing and who is gaining. So we don't have all the data points that we would need to truly know what that is, to say, they are losing 0.4 and gaining, 0.1
Right.
or 0.11. They might not be gaining anything, right? That's entirely possible.
Right.
So there's still some missing data points in there for us to really model that out.
And Nate, what was the thing that you were looking at a comment on some of the CMS stuff, about what is it going to create, or the loss? What was that one?
So I encourage everybody, if you're bored this weekend, maybe, or tomorrow, dive into the final rule and read the comments for the HEI. There's a ton of them, and CMS is required to address them. But there was one commenter that stated that, and I'm just going to read this to you all. Many plans will need to increase the number of enrollees with social risk factors after the current reward factor is removed in order to qualify for the HEI reward, even in areas where this may not be possible. And this commenter said that they did not feel like that consequence is aligned with CMS's goals of reducing disparities among existing membership. So there is a comment buried in CMS's response that said, in our simulations using data from 2021 star ratings, no contracts lost QBPs when the HEI reward replaced the current reward factor, which in all the other simulation data, they kind of like tiptoed around that, and in the response to this question actually said, well, nobody actually lost their QBP status, not just when we took the reward factor away, which is the analysis that Mick and his team did, but when we added the HEI reward in and replaced it. So I have questions based on that comment, right? This is expected to generate like $5.1 billion in savings. That can't all be from just the rebates.
Right.
So curious as to what you guys think, maybe is going to be driving a lot of that savings.
Well, I think that statement, while absolutely true, I think is actually misleading in a way, in terms of giving people a level of comfort that is probably not deserved, because like in the modeling that we did, 55% of 4+ star or reward factor plans lost a half a star's rating, but none of the 4 stars did. And the reason for that is exactly what you guys have kind of touched on already. The thresholds to be eligible for reward factor are above 3.76. So before you can even qualify to get reward factor, you've got to be in 4 stars. So when they take away reward factor, no, none of the 4-star plans would lose it because you were already there. It just gave you more of a cushion, right? But where I think that changes is Stars 2024 and the beauty of Tukey, right? All the analysis that we've done on Tukey, you're seeing these plans, again, performance stays the same, dropping 15, 20, and some well more than that points. And so on average, if you're seeing these drops, what that means is the reward factor threshold, which is the 85% for the high or the 65% for the relatively high, those are also going to drop because overall performance drops. And so if you see those drop down to 3.65, 3.7 for the 65%, all of a sudden you're going to have contracts that do get into 4 stars because of reward factor, right? And that's going to happen this year, Stars 2024, when the numbers come out this year. And so I think that's where the savings end up being, because if you then extrapolate that out for the next 10 years, you're going to have a lot of plans that are their means are below 4 stars, but reward factor gets them in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is it safe to then say reward factor is the 5-star maker, but not the 4-star maker historically?
Traditionally, it has not been the 4-star maker, because if you think back, there's only been 1 year since Stars 2018 where that threshold to hit reward factor was below 3.76. And that was Stars 2019. And it was down at 3.70 and 3.71 for, with and without QI. So no, you're right. Never been a 4-star maker, but absolutely a 5-star maker. And this dive from 5 that we're talking about, let's throw some projections out there, based on everything that's happening. I guess it's risky, but I'm going to go on record. I wonder if the number of 5-star plans is going to be less than 5 in Stars 2027 when that comes out.
I think it'll be like the old days of Stars, where it was like a dozen plans or something like that. Like that's probably where we're going to be.
Yeah, and I'm being more aggressive. I'm going even lower. We shall see.
Yeah, I mean, if we, so have you done the analysis to see? And I know we know that only one plan in 2023 stars would have gotten 5 stars without the full reward factor. But if they just gotten 0.1, do we know how many would have come into that? Just curious. We don't, do we?
Say that again.
The plans, the 57 plans that achieved 5 stars for 23 stars, they all got a 0.4 R factor. That got 40 basis points, right? Every one of them. Yeah. If they would have only gotten 10 basis points.
10 point. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Would they have still been 5 stars maybe? Or how many would have been?
Yeah, that's a great analysis that we did not do, Rex. So
maybe we'll do it and put it in the comments.
We'll run that. Way to get back to you on that.
Probably way to call us out.
I know. Come on, man.
Pretty unlikely though, right? I mean, still a 30 basis point delta.
Stefan, can we scratch that question out?
but so essentially, you'd have to be at what 3.651, or I'm sorry, 4.651 to get in there. And so I bet there are some that would still show up. But off the top of my head, we didn't do that. But it would be an easy one for us to do at this point. So we will get you that answer, Rex. Okay. That's a good point, because like if they were able to add 10 basis points of HEI, does that protect it? And that puts my 5 number at risk. 5 plans.
I mean, again, not like Nate said earlier, not that they will, right? Not that they're losing 40 and they're not automatically getting 10. I mean, right. They might not get any. Many of them might not get any, but some of them will probably get something. You would think they're high performing. You would think they're probably managing all their members well, including if they do have many social risk factor members, they're probably managing them well. It's an assumption, right? But they might not have many or any, so they might not hit those thresholds, and they might not get any. That's the thought, right? So my question is,
and that was it.
Well, okay, yeah, we know that only 7 contracts with the simulation got enough HEI to kind of get rounded up a half a star. We don't know where they were to begin with, but I mean that should tell us, set some level of expectation on where it's going to actually like make a material difference. Yeah.
The impact is going to be felt, at least based on the analysis that we've done. No 4-star plans would have fallen, right, if they would have lost the reward factor. But what was it, like half of the 4.5-star plans would have fallen to 4, and all but one, 98%.
55% of the 4.5.
Right. So, so my question is, and Nate, you were kind of alluding to this earlier, but like, what's in it for CMS? I mean, there's not it doesn't appear to be a huge QBP, at least except for what Mick was talking about earlier with that possible, change in the thresholds. But it's most definitely going to massively reduce the number of 5-star plans. So, but the 5-star plans don't get any more revenue from CMS, not a penny, than a 4.5-star plan. So, is there any other reason why CMS does not want so many 5-star plans? It's not a financial thing, but is there another reason why they wouldn't?
Well, health equity is the first pillar of their strategic plan, right? It's a complete refocusing of how we incentivize performance in the industry. By their calculations, there is a $5.1 billion benefit over the next 10 years, but above and beyond that, it is a step within the Medicare space to make this program completely refocused on delivering the highest level of care to members with these social risk factors. CMS does say later on in the comments that they started with these social risk factors because they know we could have a complete data set. If you have worked at a plan, you know that it is really difficult to get a complete race data set, ethnicity, language. It basically any other social risk factor where you're depending on a self-report, it's really difficult. So to base some sort of math adjustment on those right now is probably a little bit premature, right? We need the data to catch up so that we can make sure that those things are valid. But CMS doesn't rule out adding those in when data collection gets better, which, by the way, NCQA will force the hand, right, when they take away imputed data sets as a valid source to help stratify the data and force plans to go into direct data collection only. So I think there's a system there that's outside of the financials, but sometimes it can get a little buried.
Well, and I hadn't thought about this until you just posed that question, Rex. Like I legit don't think that CMS is trying to get rid of 5-star plans, right? But again, I didn't think about this till you brought it up. But I wonder, by taking away reward factor and putting this in place, are you now putting the impetus on the really high performing plans to put a much stronger focus on these social risk factors and ultimately things that would roll up to an HEI? Kind of like they did when they increased the weight to member experience. You saw this huge shift in market, right? Everybody's now throwing resources to improve the member experience. And if you're incenting these high performing plans, maybe they're going to be the ones that start leading the way. So, potentially there, but I think it opens up kind of a broader question for like us, right? Part of the reason that I was excited about doing this podcast, this episode, is because a lot of this is kind of what we're doing behind the scenes all the time when new stuff comes out. So we're thinking about, all right, how is this going to impact our clients? What kind of things do they need to be doing now, right? I mean, Josh on a very regular basis is looking at the numbers. And in fact, Nate and Josh as a team are often looking at these numbers and creating math path and figuring out, all right, what are your potential avenues, right, to get from where you are to where you actually want to be. And I think this is an interesting time, very similar to Tukey, where we have this tidal wave coming at us. If we're especially a 4.5, 5-star plan, we have this wave coming at us. We know it's going to happen. It's 2 years out. So what do we do right now to start prepping for that? I think most important, it's communicating with leadership and getting this information out there quickly, clearly, making it very clear that we've been used to these 40 basis points coming in every year, or these 20 or 30, whatever it might be. And that's simply going away. So we're going to see some drops. What do we need to do between now and then to start counterbalancing that effect? And I've got some ideas, but I'll open it up to you guys and see what you have, and then I can add to it after.
Yeah, I just think that's the other interesting part of this is that you're going to have, plans kind of inevitably drop, right? As we've kind of demonstrated here. And so, you're dropping, and you've always provided, we'll call it, if you're, 4.5, you're providing great service, right, to your membership. Now you basically have to provide perfect service to your membership in order to be at that 5-star level. And in order to do that, you're going to have to spend more money with more incentives, more, outreach efforts and stuff like that. So it's really, you get the $10 billion from CMS that they're projecting that is going to be, savings. But we're also going to have to spend more money as health plans in order to provide nearly perfect service if we want to stay, 4.5, 5 stars. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, from my perspective,
right,
in that way.
So,
go ahead, Rex.
Well,
I was going to throw one out, but feel free.
Well, I mean, so while you're talking through this, either you or Nate, as we talk about what plans should be doing, can you also just quickly talk about the timing of, like, we know the change itself is for 2027 stars, but when's it going to begin to be measured? Can you talk about that?
I won't steal Nate's thunder on this one. I know that he's got this one inside and out.
January. So, roughly 8 months from now. So, health plans, among all the other things you're managing in your current calendar with chart chase happening now, caps happening now, as you move through the rest of the year, you really do need to start thinking about, for those of you that have, at least the minimum percentage of members with social risk factors where you think you will get an HEI score, you've got to make sure that you can start tracking those rates now so that when January 1 hits, you know where you stand month over month for the next 2 years before that HEI actually gets calculated. To me, that's like part of that expectation setting that Mick is talking about. So reward factors going away. Maybe you already had it, maybe you didn't. But this new performance lever is coming online, and you have the membership to potentially take advantage of it. But what you may not know today is, am I performing at a level that's going to allow me to get a material benefit from this? So that's where to start if you haven't already done that. Now, CMS has pushed some of that data into HPMS, some of their confidential data through HES. So they have HES, which is the Health Equity Summary Score. It's definitely not the same as the HEI reward for anybody that is going to ask that question. It includes race and ethnicity, but there is also some LIS and disability data in there too.
Well, and I think that is, I guess, one of the beauties of HEI coming in is it opens this up to a much broader group of plans that, in the past may not have been eligible for rewards factor. So it changes the game. But it truly fundamentally and forever changes the math for the higher performing plans, right? And I think while then focusing on what you should be doing around the HEI thing, I think it's a good step, no matter what. I think it's the logical step, especially when they say reward factor is being replaced by HEI. But I also think that there are a lot of plans that are traditionally getting reward factor that aren't going to be eligible for HEI going forward. And so when I think about this, I go a slightly different route about counterbalance strategies. Like, no matter where you are on HEI, what could you be doing right now, to get ahead of this? There are basic things like just looking at the broad measure groups, especially considering the weight changes coming up. Where are you? Where do you have opportunities to bump some of this up to begin to bridge some of that gap? Another piece is the quality improvement measures, right? That was going to be the biggest thing in this proposed rule that didn't ever make it to the final rule, but we ended up putting a ton of thought to that in case it was going to happen. But I think that's a really significant thing, because especially a lot of the high performing plans, let's say 4.5, 5 star. You didn't have to focus so much on QI in the past because you knew you weren't going to have to use it, right? But now I think it becomes much more of a focus. in case they follow through on any of the proposed rule that they talked about, get ahead of this, start working on it now. But even if it doesn't, if you can figure out how to squeeze above some of those thresholds for significant improvement, those are 2 5-weighted measures that can go a really long way in covering 20, 30, 40, basis point gap that just comes up, right?
Yeah, and CMS actually, in response to another comment that I'm not going to read you this one, but the gist of it was, this is kind of punitive for you to take away, our reward for performing consistently high. And CMS's response to that was, well, contracts are already rewarded for high and consistent performance when they do well on the measure level stars and the Part C and Part D improvement measures, right? And in the proposed rule, they went through the exercise of seeing how many measures in 4 and 4.5 star plans are not already at the top of the performance. And there was a pretty steep drop off between 5-star plans and 4.5 star plans. So I understand the system of thinking here. It's consistent. Yeah.
Consistent, but like if they do roll that out to where it's only applying, QI is only applying to the hold harmless part only to the 5-star, that's going to be the one where we're going to have a whole different episode, because that's going to be very broadly reaching and impacting, and that is going to change the game. That is a 4-star maker, to reference your point from earlier, Nate, or a 4-star protector, I should probably say, by not having to do that, right?
And
we're making these sound like superheroes.
You guys have kind of addressed this, but just to be really clear, if I'm a 3 or 3.5 star plan, I'm not currently eligible for reward factor. Will I be eligible for this? Will I be able to get a HEI potentially?
All depends on what your plan looks like. Yeah, right. What your membership looks like.
But there's a chance.
I mean, if you're already a SNP plan, you more than likely, right? You will have enough LIS members to be somewhere along this continuum. So you definitely might be in the running for that. I'll just be interested to see those performance distributions. So the HEI scores ranged from, let's see, -0.8 to 1. And to get an HEI score of 1, that means that particular contract was in the top third for every single measure, right? Because it's a ratio measure. So there are some contracts, just like there are some contracts who are consistently at 4 and a 5 overall, there are some contracts that are consistently in that top third, wherever that cutoff is, across all measures. So it'll create another group, which may or may not overlap with the current reward group, that is consistent. Yeah.
But overall, I think this change is going to be interesting as we see it play out, and as we see how some of the high performing plans decide to address this, whether it's unlocking budgets to go after underperforming measures, really focusing on QI, really focusing on their perspective on the HEI. But I think it's going to be an interesting time, and I'm frankly excited to kind of see how all of this plays out.
Yeah, me too. I think we all are. It's by far the biggest thing going on right now, right? Until the second final rule comes out at some point in the foreseeable future that we don't know, but this is the meat of the first one for sure. Anything we didn't talk about regarding the loss of reward factor, the replacement with HEI that we need to address?
I have one more. It's more of a musing than anything that was. So, we have heard some contracts talk about, okay, well, should we think about beefing up our performance or our percentage of members with social risk factors as like a strategy? And my response to that is, don't get too cocky, right? So like, if you don't know, right, like it's not a cookie cutter to say, oh, we have not had dual eligibles before. We have not delivered care to a high density of disabled members before, but we'll just go ahead and do it because we want to benefit from this reward factor and we're a high performing plan. By no means would I make the assumption that I am going to be able to deliver, top third performance care to those members if I'm not used to doing it. So don't rush to take advantage of it, right? If you're gonna have that as part of your strategy, it needs to be very thoughtful and sort of supported with deep knowledge and understanding of what those members need, and making sure that you have the programs and staff in place to deliver that care. Because ultimately, if you rush into it, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting the members. So that's my final thought.
And those are the discussions going on
Good
now
final thought.
in bid strategy rooms. So yeah, no, good advice. Okay. Well, hey, thanks so much, guys. That was fun having you two on, and important topic, and more to come when a second final rule drops. But thanks for all your insights there. Hopefully our listeners find that helpful. I'm sure they will. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'd like to do
thanks.
another one of these. We'll figure out another topic and pull the team together again. This is good stuff.
Let's do it.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Okay, thanks guys.
Sounds good.
Talk to you next time.
See you, boys.
And so this question is specifically for Josh. A lot of the times when, as we're going throughout the year, you're working with clients and kind of doing a bit of math path analysis to figure out what's the most optimal, what are different opportunities that you can do to bump up potential scores. So I'm curious how you see that process potentially changing with this stuff coming into play.
Yeah, I think I think it's a couple of things. One, you've got, kind of like I mentioned earlier, you've got you basically have to be perfect now if you want to be a high performing plan. So we see even the best plans in market, they kind of ignore certain measures. That's probably not the best word that they want me to use, but osteo, for example, you've got probably most of our 5-star plans are scoring 2s or 3s, on osteo.
Yep.
Not at all uncommon. So I think you're going to have to focus on every measure going forward. And I also think, to your question about MathPath, it's a big part of what we do right now, and I do specifically, but it's going to become even more important that we do it all the time whenever new data is coming up, because we don't have that cushion anymore, right? So your MathPath has to be that much more precise, because maybe we could always count on 20, 30, 40 basis points of reward factor.
Right.
It's a cushion, right? It's just a bonus. The bonus is going away from that perspective. So now it's got to be very precise MathPath throughout the year, really beginning to end, if we're going to meet our goals. Because the cushion goes away. Maybe, hopefully we're getting, 10 to 20 points on HEI. But it just narrows that window. So you've got to be even more precise as you're putting those things together.
Yeah, I said precise and thorough, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Deep. We can't focus just on the measures that we traditionally have focused. You can't. You just got to be far more thoughtful and really look at the holistic group of measures and figure out what can you possibly move.
Yeah, we can't ignore things anymore. We can't ignore measures that are challenging or maybe expensive and maybe not worth, they don't have the bang for the buck that other measures do. We're going to have to, go all in on everything.
Yeah. Makes it all that much more interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this progresses.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, man.